It's our 50th episode, and we're going to show you how to protect your internet traffic with a BSD-based VPN. We're also going to be talking to Robert Watson of the FreeBSD core team about security research, exploit mitigation, and a whole lot more. So, of course, we're going to have the latest news and answers to all your emails on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 50, VPN, My Dear Watson, recorded August 13th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jute.
We're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got an exciting show coming up, including a very fast-paced interview, I'm sure, later with Robert Watson. You'll have to... I didn't actually get to sit with you on that one.
No, it was very good. It was in Cambridge at the FreeBSD Dev Summit.
Okay. Very cool. Well, that's going to be coming up a little later in the show, so you'll want to stick around for that. But before we get into interviews, tutorials, and the rest of the show, we're going to, of course, go right into the weekly headlines. So first up this week, it looks like Meet BSD 2014 has been officially announced.
Yes.
IX Systems puts this on.
This is a kind of an unconference or a hybrid unconference that started quite a few years ago. Originally, it was being held in Poland. And then it was being alternated between Poland and the U.S., and now I think it only happens in the U.S. lately. But
sure, every 2 years or so.
Yeah, so every 2 years in California, they have Meet BSD California. So this year, it will be November 1st and 2nd at the headquarters of Western Digital.
Oh, nice. Okay.
In 2000,
which is in San Jose.
Yeah, it's in San Jose, California. Originally in 2008, Meet BSD California was at Google, and then 2010 and 2012 it was at the Hacker Dojo in Mountain View, and in
2012 I think was Yahoo.
Yeah,
right?
2012 was Yahoo. The text is wrong here. Oh, I know. It's written strangely. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So at 2012 it was at the Yahoo headquarters. That was my first Meet BSD, and I had a lot of fun. And
the Hacker Dojo we just did 1 year, I believe.
Yes. The Meet BSD at Yahoo was interesting for me because prior to that I had only been to BSDCan and EuroBSDCon, which were both more talk oriented. Right? It was, you go, you sit in a lecture hall and somebody talks for an hour and then you go to the next thing or whatever. And while I had a lot of fun at those two, I hadn't really got time to meet and talk to very many people because, you're in a lecture setting, you're not talking to the person beside you, you're both listening to the speaker.
It's one-way communication.
Yeah, and then, there's the hallway track, but you have like 10 minutes between talks and it's like, well, I need to use the washroom and get a cookie. So there wasn't that much time. There's the evening social events, but, everybody's already talking to people they know and you feel it. But at Meet BSD, it was the first, because of the unconference style and stuff, I got to meet a lot more people and got to know people that I had met before. And I had a really good time. And so I'm really looking forward to this year's as well.
It's probably one of my favorite conferences just because of the unconference format. I know they do neat things like speed geeking, which if you've heard of speed dating, it's the same thing, except you'll go in groups and you have 10 minutes to listen to a speaker talk and answer and ask questions, and then you switch and move to the next group and away you go. So it's really cool in a short period of time to kind of get a taste of every single thing that people are talking about at the conference. Yeah,
I remember a bunch of the ones where it was, if there have been, if you have the regular style of talks where there's multiple tracks, you can't ever get to see all of the different talks. But with the speed geeking, you get that little taste of everything for 10 minutes at a time. So I got to hear about, interesting things going on in NetBSD that I probably wouldn't have heard about. Like they were talking about network distributed shared memory. So you could have shared memory where it was actually shared between machines on the network. So that and applications could share state and stuff over the network. And it's like using that for like memcache or something, or, the PHP cache or something, so that the session data for all my web servers is shared would be a huge win. And so I was very interested in that. And there was a bunch of other stuff. And just, even there was a Segway style robot that delivered coffee. And getting to see that for 10 minutes was awesome.
That is very cool. Yeah, they definitely have some neat stuff that happens at Meet BSD. So if you're anywhere near the Bay Area or can get there, we encourage you to go.
Yeah.
It's a great conference, and since it's only every other year, yeah, you want to try and make every opportunity you
Yep.
can to get out there.
And they have a reserved block of rooms at the 4 Points Sheraton.
Yeah.
So you got quite a good deal. It's like $30 off the room price or something like that for each night. And then they'll have a mix. They have birds of a feather sessions, which is generally when the conference starts during the little bit after the opening. Everybody starts suggesting topics that they're interested in, and we kind of whittle that down to 3 or 4 topics, or maybe 5 that people are interested in. Like I'm sure there'll be one on ZFS and probably one on Beehive and whatever else people want to talk about, like Linux support or desktop stuff. And then a bunch of people that want to talk about that will go into a room together while the other people are talking about the other things, and you spend an hour just talking with other people about it. And then at the end, you report that back to the whole group so that everybody gets the benefit of the talk that was had. And then lightning talks are, really short talks. And then speed geeking is that idea of, you put 10 speakers at little stations around the room, you get assigned a number, get thrown in with a group of people that you didn't pick so that you also kind of get to meet new people or are forced to interact with new people.
Sure.
Since, a lot of us are geeks, we're not that good at that part.
Well, one of the best parts about the unconference thing is it's really cool when they start the conference. They basically tell everyone, take your laptops, close them, and put them in your bag. Like we're not all coming together and meet at San Jose just so we can sit on IRC and chat the same we would, where we were originally. So it's really good. You get a lot more face-to-face time, and it's definitely a unique conference.
You can see that here in some of the pictures of, like here, you see everybody's kind of sitting in a circle and talking about stuff rather than everybody, sitting in theater-style seating facing the speaker.
Sitting on their laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Should be an exciting conference this year.
And there are a couple of actual talk-style talks as well. And then looks like it'll have Kirk McKusick, David Maxwell, and... I'm blanking out. What's the guy from Verizon? What's his name? Rick Miller.
Or VeriSign, you mean?
Yeah, VeriSign.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
No problem.
Big difference there.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's sponsored by IX Systems and Western Digital, who is obviously providing the location as well.
Well, it should be an exciting conference.
Good time,
yeah, definitely looking forward to get out there. So go ahead and register. Go to meetbsd.com, and you can start getting signed up and hopefully run into both of us out there.
Yep. And don't forget that EuroBSDCon is at the end of September, so you should come out to that too if you can.
Okay, well, next up in the news, we got a neat new article about first experiences with OpenBSD.
Yes.
So a user who started off a new blog post and series that leads off with, tired of the sluggishness of Windows on my laptop, which I'm sure many people can empathize with. And he was interested in experimenting with a Unix-like that he hasn't tried before. So, of course, the author read the famous BSD for Linux Users series that I don't know if have we mentioned that on the show before?
No, sure, but it's classic, we'll say.
Yeah, it's epic.
It's epic and classic. It's also slightly dated, but...
Yeah, well, if you haven't read that, you'll want to hit the link up in the show notes afterwards. I'm not sure yet if it's satire or serious or what it is, but it's insane. Yeah. So anyway,
it's
you'll
want
to read that at some point.
It's good, yes.
Anywho, but yeah, so this user went ahead and kind of detailed his experiences on going ahead and jumping over from Windows over to OpenBSD.
Yep. And
so he went through a little bit of his OS and distro history. I guess he experimented with some Debian for a while. And
I started with Mandriva back in 2006 and also doing, the obvious Windows 98 and XP and stuff.
Sure.
And then, in 2009, he played with Ubuntu and tried a bunch of other things. But then he gets into talking about his actual experience with installing OpenBSD.
Yeah, and it's a pretty cool walkthrough. Again, I'm not even as familiar with OpenBSD, so this is neat for me to read through and see some of the quirks and how he got around them and made it all work. Looks like he did some stuff with disabling ACPI initially to get it booted. Some stuff on downloading wireless firmware for his wireless NIC after he got installed, and then how to get X11 working, which I guess he had to disable the Synaptics touchpad driver to make that work.
No, that's
But
unusual.
yeah, it is. He said he just disabled it and used an external USB mouse as the pointing device for the time being. But I'm trying to think here. Maybe how long is this? An hour or two worth of work did he put into this? Actually getting it all set up?
Yeah.
Out of box?
Not too
I'm not
bad,
sure how much time he did researching on it. But then he kind of goes through, how he finishes his user configuration and his miscellaneous thoughts on it, and some of the things he wants to complete or figuring out why ACPI was having some problems, and the touchpad driver for X11. But yeah,
I mean, he basically says that his outstanding list of things to do are to figure out why the touchpad doesn't work and why the ACPI wasn't working. And he also wants to port over a set of fonts that he likes and all the software that he's written himself. He wants to get that added to the OpenBSD ports tree.
Well, that's cool. That's the thing about fonts. No matter what you pick, it's always wrong. Somebody else likes something different.
Yeah, everybody likes their own thing.
That's true. But he mentions how he really liked the simplicity of OpenBSD's hostname.if system for network config, and how he did manage to get Xorg and everything moved over, and it just seems to be working now. So good job there. That's really cool.
Yep.
Okay, next up we have a NetBSD and rump kernels. We haven't talked about those in a while.
Yes.
But we have an article here on rump kernels on bare metal. So let's see here. When you're developing an OS on a new or very specialized custom solution, of course, working drivers are very difficult to get right. However, in the past, we've talked about how NetBSD is doing rump kernels, which is a very unique concept, and how it can make it a lot easier. So we have an article to go along with it here, a blog post over there. And let's see, were they targeting a specific piece of hardware for this?
I don't know if they actually said... an embedded IoT, Internet of Things device. And basically how they used NetBSD rump kernels to build their own custom OS in only 1 week.
Dang. That's pretty cool.
Yep, and it's all set up to be able to do the Internet of Things type of stuff.
You get some nice diagrams showing how the OS is laid out. Where their unmodified NetBSD code lives, and then of course their POSIX user space on top. Below they have their hypercall implementations, and then their OS low-level MD code and threading. Wow, this gets into some pretty gory detail here. But
it goes right down to machine-dependent stuff. So.
Yeah. So if that's your thing in your bag, you may want to take a look and read this article. There's some fascinating stuff on here on how they made that all work using the rump stuff on NetBSD.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, it's all available under a 2-clause BSD license.
Of course, which is very cool. So we'll mention, too, if you look back at episode 8, that's where our interview was about rump kernels and exactly what they do. So you may want to refer back to that if you're not sure what exactly we're talking about.
That was a long time ago, and even I would need to refer back to that now.
Yeah. I'm thinking, let's see, what was it we all talked about? But yeah, that was a while back, very early on in the show. Let's see. And while we're on the topic of NetBSD, TJ added some notes here too. He said they've got a couple of very detailed reports with lots of pictures of the NetBSD themed booths they had at the Kanzi Open Source Conference out in Japan. So can you bring those up?
NetBSD is huge in Japan. And I'm trying to bring it up, and it's not cooperating.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I can read here some of the notes. It says they have a bunch of various machines, of course, running NetBSD, including Raspberry Pi with the small LCD display via HDMI. They had a Sharp W03 and Zaris, and Omron MC68040 Luna 2. They had a NatureTech Genial Station 737 UltraSpark laptop, and then a variety of x86 notebooks. So you're able to get any of the pictures up there?
Yes, I finally got it to open. Although
Good deal.
I don't see NetBSD in any of the pictures.
Oh, well.
I'm
sure there's a lot of pictures on here and links
to mostly
Twitter
in Japanese. So.
Oh, okay. Well, but it's cool. It's always neat to see the
there's
NetBSD
English
guys
text, but like the signs on the conference floor, so I can't tell if that says NetBSD or not.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, that's always neat to see. Yep. Again, I enjoy browsing the NetBSD booths just because they have such a wide variety of hardware usually sitting there. Exotic things like, oh, what is that? And of course it runs NetBSD.
Yep. Everything runs NetBSD.
That's right, including your toasters.
Yeah.
So next up, we have some, of course, OpenSSL and LibreSSL updates to pass out here.
Yeah.
So first up, OpenSSL has pushed out a few new versions, fixing some multiple vulnerabilities. I guess TJ says 9 by his count.
Yeah, there's so new versions are 0.9.8 ZB because they've passed Z, so they had to start adding a second letter. 100N and 101I.
Okay.
Credit goes to Ivan Fradrick at Google, the guys from Codenomicon, which were one of the two places that actually discovered Heartbleed. Logmein, Adam Langley at Google, Adam Langley at Google, Adam Langley at Google.
Oh, there you go.
Somebody else at Google, Adam Langley at Google, and two other people from Cryptography Services NCC Group.
Nice. Well, I guess some of the security things that they found and fixed include memory leaks, possible denial of service. We have crashing clients, memory exhaustion, TLS downgrades, and more.
Yeah.
Wow. So a fun group of the usual suspects that you need to get patched. So LibreSSL has also released a new version to address most of the vulnerabilities, but wasn't affected by all.
Yeah, so of the 9, they were vulnerable to 5, partially vulnerable to 1, and not vulnerable to 3 of them because they had removed code that might have actually been affected by 3 of the vulnerabilities.
That's cool. So at the time of us actually speaking this right now, which is Wednesday, Dragonfly and OpenBSD are patched, but I guess FreeBSD is not yet, nor is NetBSD.
Yes and no.
Outside of current.
In the FreeBSD ports tree, 101i and so on has been in the ports tree since like the 6th when the announcement came out. So that was updated immediately. The change was committed to current and merged back to all the stable branches. But I don't know if testing found something wrong or what, but they haven't actually done the announcement, and the FreeBSD update isn't ready yet, basically.
Yeah.
But if you want to upgrade right away, you can grab the stable branch off SVN and compile it, and it's already patched. It's just the releases that don't have the patch yet, and I'm guessing there's a reason for that. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, there's probably some. It's usually a good reason if they pulled it up.
Yeah, it usually takes a couple of days, but it's been almost a week now. So.
Yeah, well, we're keeping an eye. I know I'm keeping an eye on that for PCBSD as well, because we'd like to push out the patches as soon as we find out what it is they're working on.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, again, if you're on any of the systems that have patches or you can get a hold of the patches, you should grab those as soon as you can.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the weekly news roundup. But of course, we want to mention our sponsor for this week, which is, again, IX Systems. And before we get into everything that IX Systems does, we got, of course, a news blurb that they gave us this week about FreeNAS. I guess 9217 is now available.
Yep.
So let's see here. What's the
notables? Specifically, patch date.
Samba vulnerability.
Yeah, a possible remote exploit for Samba. So they wanted to get that fixed out to everybody right away instead of holding that up while they work on 9.3.
Yep. Okay. It looks like they increased performance of directory copy from CIFS. They added support for the NUN cipher and SSH, which can be used to improve replication
if you're replicating between two FreeNASes, you can use it to avoid wasting CPU time encrypting all the data as you're sending it over your LAN to a machine that sits directly beside the first one or whatever.
Sure.
And they also added support for doing LZ4 compression on replication jobs.
Nice.
So when you do the replication, you can basically have the backup of it be compressed, since it doesn't need to necessarily have the... you're not as worried about the CPU overhead on the backup. But yes, LZ4 is good enough. You probably want it on your main copy too, but
sure,
having that extra option is very nice.
That is helpful. It looks like they also resolved a kernel panic with the VLAN interface locking when creating a large number of VLAN interfaces. So there you go. Cool. So you'll want to grab the latest hotness for your FreeNAS box as soon as possible and upgrade, especially for the Samba vulnerability. But in addition to that, of course, so that's some of the stuff IX has going on this week. But of course, there's what they do every week, which is build lots of cool things. Yes. Everything from the little FreeNAS Mini that sits under your desk, which we're going to have an article in the news roundup where we can talk about that a little later.
Yes.
So stay tuned for that. All the way up to crazy big 80 core systems, systems with 24 10 gig NICs on it. Just and everything in between. That's what's cool about IX. They will work with you to find the exact solution to fit or fix whatever problem it is you're trying to solve.
Yep.
They're not just going to sell you the box on the shelf. We need to figure out what you want to do, and then we'll make it work the best possible for that. And of course, we need to mention the URL. I'm not sure if you have it on the screen, Alan, but ixsystems.com/BSD Now. So you want to go there, fill it out, download the guide for what you need to know when you're purchasing a server for open source. Some of the things you need to choose in your vendor or inform management about when you're making that decision. So, of course, you can always get in touch with the IX guys there via the website as well, and they will start the process of getting a custom solution built for you.
Yeah, that's the big thing is the pre-purchase consulting. You actually get to talk to somebody about what it is you're trying to do and make sure that the machine you get is going to do what you want it to do. Right? You don't have to be the expert on the hardware. They are.
Yeah, well, they're experts in all this. They're certified Intel folks who make sure that everything just works and works with whatever platform you're gonna throw on the box, and we'll fit those solutions. And they hire and employ a lot of FreeBSD committers for sure. So there's actual experts on staff who say, "Oh, well, let us take a look at that and see if we can figure out how to make this go better for you."
Exactly. And and then even after you buy your server and it's up and running, you have their white glove post-purchase support to make sure that, if you run into a problem, that they help you get it sorted out and get everything back going the way it's supposed to be.
Definitely. So again, that URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you and that you heard it here on BSD Now.
Yep.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
This week, we're joined by Robert Watson of the FreeBSD Foundation and then of the core team as well now. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, very glad to be here.
Yes, so I guess the first question we always ask people is, how did you first get started with BSD?
Oh, right. So I actually originally got started with BSD OS. So I was going to high school in Washington, D.C., and one of the parents of the school said, this internet thing is going to be really important. We should do something about that, and arranged for UUNet and others to donate a Unix server to the school, and they were going to negotiate a T1 line, but instead we ended up with a 19.2 slip line, and I can tell you the difference was substantial. That parent, it turns out, was Steve Crocker, who, of course, wrote RFC1. Is a very interesting person, very involved in early internet stuff. And the system ran a pre-release version of BSD OS, so I got to try it out. I discovered all kinds of things, such as if you send a really large ping, the machine will crash. And sadly, I then neglected to report that bug usefully, and it became somewhat more important later, but there you are. Anyway, but being a student doing some system administration was fun.
Sure. That's a good story. So I guess tell us a little bit what you're working on now.
Right, so I'm working on a bunch of stuff. So my day job is a lecturer at the University of Cambridge, where I study a blend of sort of security, operating systems, and computer architecture. So we do research in how you improve the security of operating systems and how you improve the security of applications. And we do that with compilers and work in the hardware-software interface in particular. So we have a bunch of projects. One of them is something called the Berry processor. So Berry is a hardware description of a pipeline 64-bit MIPS ISA processor that can run FreeBSD. It is now open source, so you can download the design on the internet, although, of course, to use it, you will need HDL tools and FPGAs and so on. And we use this as a platform for doing research. So we can look at the performance impacts or the security impacts of minor changes or major changes to the instruction set, and we percolate them all the way up through the stack. So we'll adjust the operating system and the compiler, the applications. And we have a recent project we've done there called Cherry, which does in-address-based security. So within a particular application, we can set up memory protection and security boundaries and sandboxes without having to use the conventional Unix process model, which we found was very useful in our capsicum work, but very expensive, and also made programming a bit difficult. Lots of different address spaces, sharing memory, sending messages, and so on. So the new model we've been working with actually makes it much easier to do. So we've just published our first high-level conference paper on this at ISCA, which is the International Symposium on Computer Architecture. But that's just a flavor of the sort of thing we do. We also do work with transforming software designs using LLVM. We do a lot of our work on FreeBSD because we have a very large application corpus, but also it's a community that's very supportive of the kind of work we're trying to do. So we have a lot of fun doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then obviously you do a bunch of work on Capsicum.
Yeah, so we designed Capsicum, I don't know, it's sort of almost maybe 8 years ago now is when we started working on the project, although actually it had its inceptions a bit earlier, and did our early prototypes and published a paper or two, and now, of course, it ships in FreeBSD, which is great. The kernel features, and in fact, Google has also ported it to Linux, which is great. We can now start talking to the Linux community. In fact, a couple of days ago, the first set of patches was posted to the Linux kernel mailing list, and we don't know if it'll be adopted, but we hope it will. But the kernel interface is just the beginning. Really, the focus of Capsicum is application security, so it's programs that have complex security models that want to use sandboxes. They want to set up mappings between entities on the internet, websites or whatever they may be, and then local processes. So providing kernel primitives makes that easier, but it's not the same as doing all the work with the applications. So we've done a couple like Chrome and so on, but what we'd really like to do is now encourage lots of people to adapt their applications. And one of the reasons to do a Linux adaptation of Capsicum is you want to avoid this chicken and egg problem. Application developers would like to program to portable APIs, so can we make these APIs available elsewhere? And one of the projects we've been talking about here over the last few days at the Dev Summit is Casper, which is a user space daemon that provides services to things in sandboxes that themselves can't run in sandboxes. So DNS access may require more access to the network than the sandbox in the application. And in the future, we hope we'll also sandbox the services because things like DNS processing are themselves risky. So we're trying to build up a larger infrastructure in the software side on the application side, which is scary for people who try to live most of their lives in the kernel and don't really believe there's anything on the other side of the system call interface. So.
Right. And it's Capsicum has also been added to a lot of the base tools in FreeBSD.
That's right. We're very excited about this. In FreeBSD 10 now, you run programs like TCP dump and so on, and things run in sandboxes. Which, it's unclear how many vulnerabilities that are have been published since it was released have actually been mitigated. But the long-term hope is the more stuff you run in sandboxes, the less privilege programs run with, the less impact a vulnerability has when it's exploited. And programs like TCP dump are particularly important because you tend to run them as root. You run them on the network traffic you trust least because you want to try and understand what it's doing. And it's also very fragile because it inspects the internals of lots of packets. So very important to run this kind of program inside a sandbox if we can. And Capsicum has made that very easy to do, which is kind of the hope.
Yeah, the other one that you wouldn't have suspected that got a bunch of attention was gzip.
Right. So, historically, zlib, which is the compression library used by gzip, has been rife with vulnerabilities. And again, a bit like TCP dump, what do you decompress or what do you compress? You compress things you don't trust. So, you download a tarball from the internet and you run it through tar, GZ, or whatever, and in the process, you've done all this buffer manipulation. There hasn't been a vulnerability in gzip in the recent past, but it's the kind of code which is very fragile, right? In C, doing complex buffer manipulation, lots of data-dependent code paths, chances of making an error are unfortunately a bit on the high side, and we'd like to be able to mitigate that if that happens. And we can do it almost for free in terms of performance costs. So why would we not run it in a sandbox? And this is very different, I guess. I was just going to mention it. Very different in some ways from conventional sandboxing, where you say there's some bad stuff, we're going to put it in the sandbox. What we're saying is we should really isolate everything from everything else because we don't have such a clear definition of what's good and bad anymore, right? Any data could be bad in some context. So.
Right. And instead of trying to enumerate what's bad, you just be like sandbox everything just in case.
Yeah, and the kind of the model we use is this sort of programmer-driven model. So it's quite different from some of the other models where you write down a big policy. Instead, what we say is as your application operates, its operations themselves grant the rights that are necessary. So we hope this is more programmer-friendly, although there are limitations to anything like this, right? Security tends to break stuff, which is a bit annoying for everyone. Yes. The goal, of course, is to break only the exploits, but sometimes you overshoot a bit. So.
Yeah. So is there anything else you're working on?
Well, let's see. So as part of Capsicum, we kind of discovered some larger problems. One of them is it's quite hard to know, have you accomplished your security goals when you compartmentalize the program? So we have some work on static analysis to allow you to document, for example, where all the past vulnerabilities were in a piece of software. So you can put little annotations in your C program. This one was a buffer overflow, and this provided complete access. This one leaked some data. Maybe this was Heartbleed, right? It managed to leak some data out. And our SOAP tools will allow you to then look at the sandboxing you've added and ask questions such as, if this was exploited again, what rights would the attacker have gained? Because I guess what our premise is, they exploit it, they gain control of something, but now we're limiting what that control offered. So they would have gotten access to this file and this file, but no longer the entire system. And what we'd love to be able to do is run this sort of in a continuous integration environment. So every time you build world, all the analysis is done. And if you discover, a vulnerability suddenly has more rights than it used to, then you actually want to break the build, right? Or print a warning and say, your sandboxing is no longer effective. So go check and fix that problem.
Right. And as you mentioned in the talk earlier, was Tempest or something started with a T that for
Oh, yes, sorry. So we had a system called Tesla, which we published at Eurosys earlier this year. This was collaboration with John Anderson, who also worked with me on the Capsicum work. One of the types of things that is quite hard to tell when you're debugging a kernel or a network protocol is, did you miss anything? So we've been doing dynamic analysis, again, using LLVM to try and insert instrumentation to detect, for example, did you access a file? When you access a file, did you perform all the access control checks? Today, if you wanted to write that by hand, you have all the C code everywhere, keeping track of data structures and events, and that is, error prone, but also a lot of work. And so the goal of Tesla was to automate that. We have a pretty nice prototype that we've open sourced, and now, over the next couple of years, the goal will be to try and convince people to use it, refine it as a tool, take it from research to something that's in general practice. And I think it is the kind of tool that's of interest, especially in a security environment, but also, network protocol state machines are also the kind of places where you mess up state transitions, and being able to have some tools to grapple with that is really useful.
Yeah. So you recently got reelected to the core team.
Yeah, that's true. I was getting time off for good behavior is my feeling, and then I guess I must not have behaved well. I was obviously very pleased to be back on the core team.
Yes,
it's a nice place to sit.
The highest mandate as well.
Something along those lines. I don't know. I'm not sure how to interpret mandate, but I guess what I'd say is, people vote for core team members on the basis of contributions to the project. I think the entire core team, if you look across it, contributions in the package system, in the space of compilers, reflect, I guess, some of the best things the project is doing. And the hope, I guess, obviously, with the core team is that rather than bogging these people down in administrative stuff, you actually kind of give them the ability to flag wave a bit more and help get people together to work on larger goals. Yeah, and that's really a nice opportunity. Yeah. So we'll see how it works out. I'm not sure I have any specific agenda except to say, obviously my interests in security continue. Trying to make FreeBSD a more effective platform for research and teaching is also one of the things I'd really like to do.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing we were talking about yesterday. You have some...
Right. So it turns out researchers at Cambridge also teach, and so I have some undergraduate teaching and some graduate level teaching. And one of the things I've been working on for the past 3 or 4 months is trying to prepare a new course in operating systems for our master's program. So one of the challenges in teaching operating systems is that it is a very risky business, which is to say, if you've hacked on kernels and with C code, it takes one little bug and, a week goes past while you try to debug the problem. And, obviously, there's a certain requisite amount of suffering required for any student who takes a course in operating systems. But if they suffer doing the wrong things, then it's not been morally improving. So we don't want people to trip up over some, virtual memory bug or locking thing. What we want them to do is, trip up over the interesting intellectual problems. So the approach we've decided to use is to use one based on tracing and profiling. So although some students might hack kernels, in fact, most of them are going to be exploring the behavior of kernels through tools like dtrace and hardware performance counters. And I guess to some extent, we're going to try and have them reproduce classic performance problems or explore classic performance behaviors. So use tracing tools to understand TCP congestion control or to look at the behavior of disk I/O. And if we can frame these problems well, they're going to get depth in terms of the behavior of kernels and complex systems, but be able to do so relatively quickly. So the challenge will be there in learning about the system and learning about and exploring the problem, presenting the data, but not so much in tripping up over how do you build a kernel and dealing with kernel debuggers. Right. Although obviously, the more ambitious the student is, the more we hope that maybe they'll say, well, I spotted this kernel bug doing the tracing, and maybe I'll go fix it and improve it, which would be a lovely outcome.
So. Exactly. And I guess the other thing we were talking about was building an open source set of material, not just for that class, but...
Absolutely. So, I mean, open source seems like it should be a great boon for teaching. And if you look at what happens with programming languages, open source languages like Python are really instrumental in how you teach computer science now. And platforms like FreeBSD and Linux and so on have been very useful for teaching, but we don't do all that much teaching about the platform itself. So as we prepare this course material, we'd like to arrange it so that it's available for other people to use. In fact, we have a bunch of FreeBSD developers coming to hang out in Cambridge this summer to work on the course. So George Neville-Neal, another member of the core team, member of the foundation board, is going to visit us for a month, and Gabor Pali, who's previously been on the core team, are also going to come hang out involved in teaching computer science and try to not just craft a course suitable for our students, but also something where you can have the lectures online, you can have exercises in virtual machines people can download, suitable for self-teaching or use at other universities or in other teaching environments, which I think, hopefully will be a really fun summer, but I think also quite challenging as you work through the details. People often don't realize that for every hour of lecture time, you spend 8 hours preparing or 16 hours preparing. And for every hour or two of lab time, someone has spent weeks or months preparing that hour so that students they trip over only the right problems on a good day. And also you have to refine the stuff, right? The first year, it's always a bit bumpy, but these are products as well. Therefore, we can open source them and share them. Looking forward to doing.
Hopefully that'll get the refinement done more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, crowdsource or something along those lines, whatever the term is. But yes, I mean, the other thing is, you look for different things. We are looking to teach a sort of master's level course, which means we expect pretty competent computer science background, but perhaps quite a diverse computer science background. But we're doing it in a very structured setting, right? Labs in classes, prepared machines in a managed environment. Right. When you are providing teaching material online, your audience may not have the same level of structure around it. So we want to provide virtual machines for teaching that are very robust against different environments. You have VMware, or you're running on this hardware or that hardware. You're wearing Beehive or VirtualBox or whatever the tool is. Do you have access to processors that have performance counters? When you're doing network simulation, does the TCP connection behave the same way if you do it on your own machine as it does in the lab? Probably not. So we need to be a bit careful. There, having a really broad audience is good. And I think everyone who's involved in the project would love to get this material available for anyone to use at home or to use in a corporate teaching and training environment, not just in our lab environment. So it's going to require some work, I think.
Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
I don't think so. I think it's really pretty interesting to sit on this the boundaries between research and teaching and also production use. I guess one comment I have is in the academic environment, open source helps keep it real, which is to say you can deal with companies, you can work with people who are going to take the results of your research, get it into product, figure out what is the transition process, where do you have to fix it, but also make sure you really understand the good problems. I think the open source community, especially the FreeBSD community, is a really great place to do this. People are building very exciting tools, very exciting products, so we can try to help them do that and understand the problem better. So having a lot of fun.
Yeah, David mentioned that during his interview with us, where it's when people have done research using FreeBSD, they've actually managed to commit that research into the operating system and then go out and show that this is actually being used by people now.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not just research anymore.
You have to think about the process. I think in some ways it's by collaborating with the open source community and developing the ideas for the research and getting people to try it out in settings like the FreeBSD Developer Summit here at Cambridge, you're more likely to not just get the research transitioned, that's very exciting as a researcher, stuff that can be used in the real world, but also make sure you produce research that can be transitioned. And that's a place where the FreeBSD community is really open to collaborate and explore. And, people may say, well, that's a crazy idea, but they maybe look at something else and say, that's really interesting. Could you do more of that? And then, you have a dialogue. It's not just toss something over the wall, post some patches on your website. You have to participate in the community. But while that comes with a cost in terms of time and engagement, it's also really a great opportunity.
Yeah. So. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, well, thank you.
Okay, next up, the news roundup. So before we get into that, though, we want to mention the sponsor for this week as well is Tarsnap. Yes. And that URL is tarsnap.com/BSD Now. You'll definitely want to go check that up. If you're not doing backups, first of all, you need to stop everything and go get your backup set up now.
Yes, I was talking to Colin yesterday, and he said that not enough of you are signing up.
Oh, you guys need to get
a bunch of you aren't doing your backups. You don't even have to be using BSD. You're using Linux. Whatever you're using, you need to do backups.
You do.
You do.
And even if it's just a small amount, which is, what I'm doing here, I just have a really teeny amount that I'm using Tarsnap for of some private data and whatnot. But man, if I lost that, think of keys and whatnot. We need that stuff kept safe somewhere offsite where I can trust that Colin's not snooping at it or not Colin, but maybe somebody who's pressuring him. Saying,
nobody else can snoop it ever.
Yeah, exactly. That just doesn't happen with Tarsnap. So I trust what's going on here. And if you guys, again, if you're not doing backups, A, you need to get backups happening right away. B, if you are doing backups and you're not using Tarsnap, you're using some other offsite solution, you may want to reevaluate that because you want to know for sure that nobody's going to be able to pull your data, at a later time.
Tarsnap doesn't promise to not give out your data. They give you the code that proves that no one else can get your data.
Correct.
Big difference there.
That is a huge difference, and of course, it's all open source. So hey, if you don't take our word for it, don't take Colin's word for it. go look at it yourself
yes.
and prove it to yourself.
Like, oh, I see how this works.
Yeah, I mean, and they're straight up front with it. I mean, if you go to tarsnap.com, you'll even see they offer bug bounties. So if you manage to find a bug in Tarsnap, he'll even pay bounties for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely, again, don't take his word for it or our word for it. You should take a look at it yourself. But he has clients for all kinds of different OSs. Of course, we mentioned BSD and Linux, but OS X, Minix, Open Indiana, Cygwin, and many other Unix-like operating systems. So no matter what you're running, you should be able to get Tarsnap on there.
Exactly.
Usually it's available
probably
via
already
the Pulitzer package system.
It's already in your package manager. So
yeah, so you will definitely want to get a hold of that. And if you've ever used tar in the past, it's pretty stinking simple to use Tarsnap because the syntax is all almost identical. So again, go ahead and get set up. All you need is $5 for an initial deposit, and then they charge you in pico dollars a byte.
Is billions of a dollar. So
yeah. So you're in pretty good shape here. So again, you'll want to get set up with Tarsnap as soon as possible. And go to tarsnap.com/BSD Now.
Sorry, that's millions of a dollar. Billions is nano dollars. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Still, imperceptibly small amount of money.
Yes, it's teeny. So.
And yes, the other nice thing is because it's prepaid, it means that you never end up with a surprise bill. You can only use as much money as you put in.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So let them know that we sent you. And get set up and get your data backed up now, safely and securely offsite with Tarsnap. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's get right into our news roundup now, Alan. So first up, we have FreeBSD cgit server, a blog article. So one of the notes TJ wrote here is if you use Git like a certain host of this show, and that's me, I admit it, I like Git, I'm a fan, then you've probably considered setting up your own server. We did for a while, and we're using GitHub at the moment, but definitely there are advantages to having your own. So this article is going to take you through the process of setting up a jailed Git server complete with a fancy web front end. Ooh, shiny. So it shows you how to set up multiple repos with key-based user separation and other cool things. And better yet, the author of the post is also a listener of this show. So thank you for setting this in. Anything you want to mention about that one, Alan?
Yeah, so basically you're just installing Nginx with the FastCGI wrapper, Git, cgit, which is a web interface, and Gitolite, which is a expanded command line interface.
Sure.
And then you're just setting up the keys and stuff, and then it walks through actually just setting up your the web interface.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple setup. You could probably do this in 5-10 minutes, depending on if you have all the packages available, and away you go. Yeah, definitely want to take a look at this. If you're ever interested in setting up Git or even learning, this is a great way you can learn your own private repo.
Yeah, it also mentions when you're setting up Nginx that Mozilla has a document over on their wiki that explains the preferred cipher order list and the justification for the different ones, and so you can help pick how you want to set up their your SSL as well.
Nice. Cool. Well, I'll take a look at the link in the show notes. Okay, next up we have backup devices for small businesses. It looks like smallbusinesscomputing.com has an article here where they reviewed 6 different types of data backup devices for small business.
Like starting with just copy your files to a USB stick.
Yeah.
Basic stuff. Why that's not a good idea. And then USB hard drives.
Yeah, we're scaling up now. Okay.
But, they often have problems. They're usually pretty cheap, not that reliable. There's no RAID or anything. And everybody's had data lost on one of these things.
Sure. And then next up, they go up to solid state drives.
Yep.
And then from there, we got the, was it the Aegis Padlock Fortress they talk about?
Yes.
And then
looks like security by having shiny buttons.
That's right.
And then there you go, the FreeNAS Mini.
FreeNAS Mini, that's right. So they described it as a wonderful network storage server powered by the best network attached storage software, FreeNAS. They said you can use it exclusively for backups or file sharing, multimedia streaming. And if you're into doing it yourself, of course, you can download FreeNAS for free, installed in your own hardware. But the cool pull quote at the very end of it is that he says there's plenty of NAS appliances out there, and the FreeNAS Mini gets my vote for the best value and best performer.
Yeah.
So how cool is that?
Sleek little hardware appliance, so it looks nice, so it stacks up against the other ones. But 4 hot swap SATA bays give you up to 16 terabytes of storage, and it has 16 gigs of ECC memory, which you don't often get in the appliance, especially the home appliance type ones. and it has dual gigabit Ethernet ports, which you also don't usually get in the home versions.
True. And it comes with an 8-core, 2.4 gigahertz Intel processor, a hardware encryption module, physical locks, and the FreeNAS itself is installed on an internal flash storage module. So
yes, the other thing is that the processor is the Intel Atom, but it's the server version. So you actually get 8 cores and the encryption offload and all the fancy features, but you get it all in like a 17-watt power envelope.
Yeah, that's pretty slick.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, next up, we have a new interview about Xenokara, which is the fork of Xorg from OpenBSD.
Yes, this is their fork of Xorg that for much longer than newer Xorg that's just starting to come out now, you could run without root privileges.
Oh, yes. So this is kind of a follow-up to last week's Open SMPT interview. Yep. And the Russian blog that we mentioned previously interviews Matthew Herb and talking about Xenokara, of course. In the interview, he's talking how large and complex the upstream X11 development is. Different components being worked on by different groups of people and whatnot, how they test codes, including new framework, and of course, security auditing. So Matthew is also a developer of upstream Xorg and an OpenBSD developer, so it's natural for him to do a lot of this work on maintaining this in OpenBSD. So it's a fascinating article. You want to take a look. Again, just like we mentioned last week, if you visit the site and don't get scared by seeing it in Russian, scroll down.
Scroll down a little bit. I think, yeah, the whole interview is in English. It's just the opening at the top is in Russian, probably because people that go to this blog are normally expecting Russian and they don't want to scare them off with all English.
Yep.
But yeah.
So you want to take
There's some interesting questions, including like how many developers are involved in actually working on Xorg and stuff.
So
and
like
it said
50 to 60. Yep.
Yeah. Well, if you take Xorg, include the Mesa system and then the Linux kernel graphics stack people and all the X people, et cetera, it's about 50 to 60 people who commit on a regular basis.
Which is pretty cool. And then he talks about some of the tools, tests, and frameworks that he uses specifically. And he said, in addition to all those suites, let's see here, Peter, how do you pronounce that? Hudder has developed a new integrated test suite for the Xorg server that's supposed to be run automatically from the Xbuild system. So that's pretty cool. Helps him keep things running. He said his case is that's how he does most of his testing. He maintains x.org and OpenBSD, and he's also been helping with the NetBSD one in the past. So that's kind of interesting. How do you test new features? How do you use continuous integration in the development process? And what system they use for tracking open bugs? They use Bugzilla in this case, bugs.freedesktop.org.
Yeah, it also talks about Xorg supports more or less every popular operating system, Linux, FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, Solaris, even Microsoft Windows. How do you provide confidence and stable work for when you're talking about all those different operating systems that are so different? And it's, it's talked by their many volunteers, some paid employees from the various different projects. The main developers mostly focus on Linux, which has become the main development platform only in the last 10 or so years. Before that, it wasn't so much. And they say that it's a bit unfortunate that some of the people don't get involved more in supporting the other systems as well.
Sure. Definitely a fascinating article. Gosh, probably a good 2-3 pages here. Read through. It's a good interview. So again, you want to check that out in the show notes afterwards if you'd like to read through the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay, next up in the news roundup, we have building a high-performance FreeBSD Samba server. So, wow, this is kind of a neat article. Of course, if you've got to Pixie boot several hundred Windows boxes to upgrade XP to 7, what's going to be the best solution? Of course, it's ZFS, FreeBSD, and Samba, obviously.
Yeah, so they said it's so there's a mid-size education organization, which I'm guessing means a college, but could mean a school.
Sure.
And yeah, they have several hundred desktops that were running Windows XP, and they wanted to upgrade them all to Windows 7. And all they had was the summer off between classes. And so they built up a new master disk image that had everything on it, and then they were going to Pixie boot each machine and basically image it on there. And so they needed to read a 20 gigabyte file over CIFS on hundreds of machines at once.
Sure. And in this case, they mentioned how the caching, the ARC in particular, is really helpful in this case because they're pretty much reading the same data over and over and over and over.
If you have 20 gigs of ARC and a 20 gig image, then you will have your whole image being served out of RAM, so that'll help a lot. So they say they just grabbed an old piece of hardware they had there and installed FreeBSD on it with ZFS, set up Samba, provide the file sharing, and the constraining factors become the edge network and the client's PC rather than disks on the actual image server.
Sure.
It looks like, they had an old HP ProLiant G5 with 48 gigs of RAM and two 72 gig 10,000 RPM SATA disks in RAID 1 and four 1 gigabit network interfaces.
Looks like they used some NIC bonding too, using lag and LACP. So they use it for load balancing and increasing the throughput.
Yeah, so they grabbed a 6-year-old piece of hardware and showed that even using that, they could saturate 4 gigabits to the network.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
And yeah, the big thing there being that because they had 48 gigs of RAM, fitting their 20 gig disk image 100% in RAM with the ZFS ARC meant that they didn't suffer from the fact that all they had was 2 disks to read from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's only the first one that's going to take a little longer as it's pulling it really from the disk.
And they have some recommended settings in here for Samba, like setting the send and receive socket buffer size, setting TCP no delay. So normally you can set TCPs so that especially when you're sending a lot of small packets, it's like if I send a small packet, wait a little bit to see if there's a second one so you can combine them and reduce the amount of load on the network. Mm-hmm. But, when it's all on a LAN and you're more worried about latency and stuff, turning that off can make a difference. And they also talk about, the minimum receive file size structure and specifically using asynchronous I/O and send file. So when you use send file, you basically, instead of Samba having to do the work, it just says to the kernel, take this file descriptor and write the data, read the data from it and write it to the socket, and that happens all in the kernel instead of having to context switch back to the application all the time. And it definitely speeds things up quite a bit.
Very cool. Very cool. And of course, they have nice graphs to go along with it. So you can take a look at what some of the real world results were that they got here, including simultaneous users. They have some graphs of the ZFS ARC cache efficiency. That's pretty slick. And of course, some disk I/O graphs. So the conclusion here at the bottom of the article is that free software can be combined with legacy hardware for the win. The hardware is worth about 300 pounds and is of the type commonly found in skips at medium-sized organizations. Free software extends its life and provides utility exceeding proprietary solutions. So
right, he means found in the garbage, basically. If you don't read British,
right?
Yeah, 6-year-old HP hardware is the stuff that the enterprises tend to get rid of because they've depreciated it now, and for tax reasons they want new stuff. And it shows that that doesn't have to be the case. That hardware can still do quite a bit of good because a decent quad-core plus processor with 48 gigs of RAM makes a really nice storage server.
Yeah. If you got that much memory, that will serve files till the cows come home.
Exactly.
So, that is cool.
I guess the weak point on that system would probably be that the disk controller probably doesn't support 3 terabyte disks, because it's just old enough that it might be an issue. But other than that, yeah. So I should take a look at this. My Samba server has very much the same configuration, but my problem is I've never tried to use it with 20 clients or hundreds of clients to actually saturate the network. And on his graph here, you can see this is a rather zoomed out view over the course of quite a bit, but you can see that he had a peak of like 2.5 gigabits per second. But, when you're going that fast, the problem is that you transfer all 20 gigabytes so fast that it doesn't make as much of a blip on your graph.
Sure. Wait, there it was. I think I saw it.
Well, in the 1 year view, that's zoomed out to, that's like probably 4 or 6 hours per tick on the graph. So that he averaged 4.5 gigabits or 2.5 gigabits per second for a 6-hour period. That was not necessarily his peak.
Sure.
So it'd be interesting to see what those graphs look like on the 1 month view rather than the 1 year view.
Definitely. Oh, very cool. Well, again, you want to check out that article. It's a pretty neat read. Okay, and that's the end of our weekly news roundup. We'll be back in just a moment with our next segment. Okay, next up is our feedback section of the show. And before we get into a couple of the emails that came in, we want to mention there's a couple interesting BSD Reddit links that are going out that we have in the show notes. You want to check out topics about thinking of coming to BSD from Arch specifically, and a lot of feedback on those. Anything you want to mention on those specifically, Alan?
Yeah, so the first one here is an Arch user who's considering going to OpenBSD, and he was asking for advice on references and stuff to look at. And people provide him some links to like the OpenBSD FAQ, and people specifically saying that the OpenBSD man pages are definitely the first place to stop. They have very good docs there. And those have actually been getting quite a bit of improvement lately. They also updated the web interface for viewing the man pages on the web, which is useful if you haven't installed OpenBSD yet, or if you're looking for help while installing it. So that's good. And then there's lots of other advice in here. So it's definitely worth taking a look at.
And then the next one, I guess, just about coming to any BSD specifically, he's kind of asking which one.
Well, yeah, this one's specifically a guy that's coming from Arch to BSD, and he kind of talking about his experience.
Yeah, definitely cool. A lot of good comments on this one. Okay, well, you'll want to check those out afterwards in the show notes. We'll have the full links, of course. But let's get into our questions from you guys out in the audience. So the first one's from PB talking about Ceph storage. He said, I wonder if you could give us your thoughts on Ceph storage cluster. We've been playing with it a bit and are considering rolling it out to our clients. Our use case is mainly that we can send a box to the client and have their storage expand without too much work. Currently, we have mostly Debian boxes with ZFS, which he said inspired by Alan's posts, and that works fine from a reliability performance point, but always a lot of configuration when adding or removing boxes. We occasionally remove boxes to store off-site and to get bulk video off them, like security footage, if there's been an incident. I got started with Ceph using Proxmox, which we use for our network. Seems okay, but he'd like to know if there's any gotchas or if he's barking up the wrong tree here.
I don't really have any experience with Ceph.
Nor do I.
I'd like to take a look at it and just know what it is, but I don't know that much about it. I know there are a couple of cluster storage file systems that people have been working on bringing to FreeBSD. The FreeBSD help Twitter, Koobs' Twitter, whichever one is his, has been tracking a couple of them that are at the point of just looking for testers. So they're mostly working, and they just need to make sure that there's to whittle down those edge cases.
A little quality assurance needs to be done here.
Yep.
Well, that's cool. So hopefully we'll have a few more to play with. Yeah, I've not personally played with Ceph either, so I can't.
Yeah, I've been
really comment too much on it.
Getting interested in doing looking at a cluster storage system because we're up to like 5 storage servers now, and currently we're just manually partitioning stuff. This customer goes over here, and that customer goes over here. But a cluster type storage system might be quite useful for us.
Oh, very cool. Okay, well, next up, we have Sean asking about jelly, or gelly, I guess as you would say. I like saying jelly. I don't know why. It makes me think of a sandwich, but whatever. That's all good. He says, I have the following disk set up in my server. He says he has 2 SSD drives and a ZFS mirror. He has 1 SATA drive, which is just a single disk with ZFS. He said all the above drives are encrypted using Jelly, and he uses an unencrypted USB for /boot. He said his ZFS root sits on the mirrored SSD drives. All the drives are encrypted and use the same encryption key. Yesterday, I rebooted my server after applying the latest security updates, and the first disk would not accept the password no matter how many times I tried. Therefore, after booting up, my ZFS root mirror was broken. Uh-oh. He said, here's when it got even weirder. After booting up when my ZFS mirror was broken, since the first disk in the mirror couldn't be unlocked or decrypted using the password I normally use, if I run jelly attach-k, then the key, and then the device, and enter the same password that it tries at boot up, it works. After that, if I bring the disk online and the ZFS mirror resolvers and all that, it's all good. This is worrying, however, because if the second disk fails or if I reboot, he won't be able to boot up the machine. So why can I not decrypt the one disk at boot up? I know I'm entering the correct password as the other 2 disks decrypt fine. In the past, I've decrypted all 3 disks with rebooting with no issues at all, and my bootloader hasn't changed, or bootloader.conf.
Right. So this is a one that I think the problem he's having is actually one that Brad Davis and I found. When Yelly pops up its password prompts, sometimes the password prompt gets buried, right? And people don't see it.
Sure.
And people that know just, type in their password or whatever, and then they can resume. But the problem is if you hit enter, and then it brings up it says that failed, and it brings up a second prompt. There's a bug in FreeBSD 10 release where it erased the copy of the key file that it had in memory. And so so after you fail the password the first time, no matter if you type the password right the second time, it won't accept it because it's erased the key, so it fails to decrypt every time. So that was fixed in head. I don't know when it got merged back to 10 stable. I need to hunt that down and make sure it ends up in 10.1 for sure. But
yeah, 10.1 for sure this fall.
So it sounds like what could be happening is that he's not seeing the first password prompt, hitting enter or something, and then entering the correct password in the second prompt, and it's not being accepted properly. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's failing to decrypt the first disk.
Sure.
And then the second disk, because he's entering the password correct the first time, it's working fine. Mm-hmm. So in which case, you'll see that the password prompt is buried in all the other messages, like USB attach or whatever. If you just type the password correctly without pressing enter or something to clear the screen first, then if you get the password right the first time, it should work properly. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that has been fixed. He says he's running 10 stable, but he doesn't say what date, so it doesn't answer the question.
Maybe if you just upgrade your 10 stable, maybe it'll suck in that fix.
I'm trying to remember where in the source tree that is so I can see if it's been backported yet, but I'll look that up after the show.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, hopefully that is indeed the problem.
Yeah, it sounds, if that's the problem, then that is the particular bug, is that if you enter the password wrong the first time, it won't accept it on the second or third attempt. It won't be able to do it because that bootdir encryption.key has been erased from memory too soon. It was only supposed to do that once you succeeded or failed completely, not after the first wrong attempt.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, next up, we have Steve asking a question about lightweight installs. He said he was excited to find the latest edition of BSD Now in my podcast client this afternoon. He listened to the first part, and Chris's talk of KDE and PCBSD got me wondering about whether my old laptop could run a BSD desktop. He says it's an 8-year-old Toshiba Celeron with 2 gigs of RAM, 32-bit. It's currently running Xubuntu 14.04, and it's usable for most everyday tasks. If I wanted to run a BSD desktop on aging hardware for consistency with my other systems, would it be better to install an older version of PCBSD from 5 or 6 years ago, or a newer FreeBSD with a lightweight GUI on top? Are there any lightweight GUIs for BSD? Thanks in advance. Love the show. Got me excited to be trying going all BSD. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'd almost recommend just doing a newer FreeBSD, just grabbing the 32-bit FreeBSD, so you'll have updated packages, because a PCBSD from 5 or 6 years ago.
That's like just asking
ancient
for...
Firefox.
Yeah. And, vulnerable ancient Firefox. And just,
it's not worth it. Since we don't roll,
I can't even imagine what PCBSD from 6 years ago looks like at the moment.
Yeah, gosh, like 7.0 or something.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Definitely don't do that.
Yeah.
Just grab FreeBSD 10, grab the 32-bit ISO, install that on the box. You should be able to have access to packages with package ng. So just package install Xorg. And as far as lightweight GUIs go,
I think there are over 100 different window manager things in the ports tree that you can install. So
I mean, I just start with something like OpenBox maybe, or Fluxbox, or just depending on how light you want to go, you could grab LXDE if you want something a little bit more modern but still pretty lightweight, and kind of work your way from there and just decide what runs best on the box.
Yep.
But should work. You didn't say what type of video hardware, maybe Intel. Hopefully that should just work out of box then.
It's 8 years old, so hopefully that works.
Yeah. So it should just do its thing. But that would definitely be the route to go. Try that out and see what happens.
But I wouldn't recommend running 6-year-old anything.
Yeah, no, not if you can help it. That's just unnecessary. Okay, well, cool. Hopefully answer your question. So next up, we have a question on FreeNAS jails from Lachlan. Mm-hmm. So he says, first of all, thanks for the interesting show. FreeBSD is becoming my #1 server OS choice for me, namely thanks to the great docs. He said he's trying to get the BT Sync plugin to work on his new maxed out FreeNAS Mini he just bought. Mm-hmm. So he said, now the nitty gritty. He followed this article on the web, a blog post on BitTorrent's website. He created BT Sync user and group on the NAS, like Doko says, with UID 817 username. Says he differed from the docs here a little. He let the user shell to no login, disabled password login. He created ZFS datasets as described and set the permissions to be even more loose than what they suggested.
Isn't there a pre-built?
There might be a pre-built plugin for this one already. You should almost check out the FreeNAS site.
Yeah, because doing it yourself seems like more work than it should be.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's just see what he ran into at the problem here. He said he installed the plugin, started the jail. He said it works. He can get to the internal IP import and access the web GUI. And he said this is where it doesn't work. When he goes back to the jails tab and clicks on the new jail, which will be called something like BTSync 1. Second button on the left, click Add Storage. For source, click through the drop-down, select the second data set you need, files, destination. So it looks like he's having trouble mounting the data set into the jail.
Yeah.
Let's see, added the source dir MNT tank data, BTSync. Attempt to make a folder in the destination field called BTSync. He gets a log. Okay, the path could not be mounted. MNT tank data BTSync mount failed. Mount MNT tank jail BTSync 1 BTSync no such file or directory. Okay, so we definitely just got a improper path here somewhere.
Well, he's trying to mount the ZFS data set, or I guess it's doing a nullfs mount rather than changing.
Yeah, it should be nullfs.
You need to create the BTSync directory inside the jail before you mount it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to mount to the directory that doesn't exist. Oh, he says that's what he says. The next thing he did was go and create that directory.
It says cannot identify. If I remove the nullfs mount, now if I don't think. Oh, he sends us a list of his outputs here.
Remember that when you're inside the jail, the paths will be relative to the jail, not to the host system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, here we go. He's got...
well, specifically, if he created the BTSync user on the host system, it won't exist in the jail, right?
Sure, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Like you need to have them on both.
They're separate.
With the same UID number.
Yeah. All right, so he's got... The nullfs mount is mounted, but he's just saying, I guess, the BTSync app itself can't see it. And that would be because it might not...
Well, he's logged into his jail here.
I don't actually see him ever being logged into the jail. He's always root
Yeah,
at
he's
FreeNAS.
just doing JLS, but he's not doing like JExec into the jail.
Yeah.
That way.
So you're making changes on the host, and the jail's basically a separate operating system almost. So you need to make sure you are actually doing stuff in the jail when it needs to happen in the jail.
You should run JExec 1, bin sh or something.
Yeah, where one is the ID of the jail. So when you do JLS, you'll see some different jails with different numbers. But
But once you get into there, then you can check, make sure the user BTSync exists in the jail and that matches. And then if you do a listing of that directory, do you have read and write access to it inside the jail?
Mm-hmm. Because when I can see the. Oh, I see.
Oh wait, no, he does run JExec 1 TCSH.
So he logs in and he looks at the directory and he sees the stuff and the user. So does he actually have an error message here? Like he had the mount error and he solved that, but he doesn't include the error message that BitTorrent Sync is giving him.
Yeah, I'm not
sure.
sure.
Make sure it's BitTorrent Sync is actually running in the jail. Like it doesn't really talk about where he installed it to.
Well, it sounds like into the jail, but
yeah.
Oh, this may be one it's worth pinging the FreeNAS guys on.
But yeah, I thought there was a pre-built plugin for that.
Yeah, there might be one for BTSync.
Yes, there is a BTSync plugins for FreeBSD or FreeNAS 9, as well as Couch Potato, Crash Plan, Firefly headphones. What else they got here? Mini DLNA, Own Cloud, Plex Media Server, SABNZ, BD. The newsreader thing, Sickbeard, Sync thing, and Transmission, the torrent client.
Okay. Yeah, well, you might just want to grab the pre-built.
Because
avoid all the work.
Yeah, because that's been tested more and will probably just work for you, and that's probably what you were looking for and just didn't know to look for it.
Okay. All right, so last question we have this week then is from Justin, and the description is PCBSD Tour. So he says, I appreciate the quick demo of PCBSD. He says he's been tracking the project for some time now, testing it at various releases. My question's about TrueOS. As I understand, TrueOS is a vanilla FreeBSD edition with the addition of PCBSD command line tools. Is it safe to assume that TrueOS, like the full workstation of PCBSD, is also defaulting to ZFS for now? Yes, it is. So it's using the exact same installer the graphical PCBSD installer is using, and you'll end up with a ZFS on root environments and all that stuff. So he says, for a future demo, I'd love to see some of these tools in action, perhaps a demo showing where to do task A and FreeBSD steps 1, 2, 3 as required to how you've improved the workflow with the tools included in a TrueUS install. Thanks for all the great work. So yeah, that would be something fun. We should do that here in the future.
I'm just wondering if there's a good task that where, doing it on FreeBSD is a couple of steps, but they're not too bad.
No, say our command line tools would be mostly things like creating the boot environments and managing the update manager, which will do all your package updates and then create the boot environment beforehand and all that.
Or like
so
Warden,
skip a
but
bunch of steps.
Actually creating jails by hand on FreeBSD. It's like
yeah, Warden create and then a couple flags and you end up with the jail.
Yeah.
We should see if we can schedule one of those here in the near future as kind of a follow-up. So what he's talking about, the TrueUS, for those who haven't seen, we started rolling those with our Edge packages. We have a CD-sized ISO now, which is just the text installer, but it's PCBSD's text installer, so you get the root on ZFS all laid out for boot environments with grub integrated and stuff, so you can boot into them, all from a text-based installation. So like a FreeBSD ISO. We'll be announcing a little more about that when 10.03 hits early next month. But that would be a great demo to do. So we'll see if we can schedule that in a future episode.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, cool. That was our last question for the week. So as we finish up, of course, some things we need to mention. All the tutorials are going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. So if you missed one or need to go back and refer to something, just hit the website. I'm sure you can find it there. Yep. We also want to give a special thanks out to our viewer, Adam, a.k.a. BSDX, for writing most of today's OpenVPN tutorial. Thank you, Adam. Also, send your questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We would appreciate if you send stuff there because we don't necessarily monitor all the other social media channels, and that'll make sure that the three of us see it, Alan, myself, and TJ, our producer. And, of course, if you're interested in watching the show live, you can do that Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. It's a lot more fun. We can even interact a little bit with you on IRC, and you can influence the direction of the show in some ways. So that is cool. So try and hop online if you can and watch us live.
Yes, and if you have a tutorial to send in, like Adam, that'd be great. Or if you have corrections to the tutorials we already have, our tutorials are actually living documents. They get updated all the time.
Sure.
And if
anything's getting a little stale, please send in corrections and we can get those fixed up.
Yep. And
cool. Okay.
Stay tuned after the end of the show for the tutorial on OpenVPN.
Excellent. Well, we'll see you guys again in a future episode, and try and watch us live next week, 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, guys. All right, when you're on an untrusted network, the last thing you want is someone logging all your traffic. That is bad, for the record. While doing most of your work over SSH is probably going to be the best solution, sometimes you want to encapsulate all of your traffic in a tunnel. So OpenSSH can do that with some extra work, but OpenVPN is a tool pretty much made for this exact purpose. So OpenVPN is going to work on all the BSDs, but we're going to be using FreeBSD in this tutorial. And of course, you can adapt the locations and configurations to other BSDs very easily if you want to follow along with what we're doing here. So to get us started, you're going to start by installing OpenVPN from ports or packages and get rolling. So first up, we're going to add OpenVPN to the startup items on the client and server, and run some commands to get those set up. So take it away, Alan.
Yep. So for this week's tutorial, we'll be setting up OpenVPN. So first, we need to install OpenVPN. So just package install OpenVPN. And there, we now have OpenVPN. Then we can do sysrc OpenVPN underscore enable equals yes. And that'll set that. And sysrc OpenVPN if equals tune. So there are two types of interfaces OpenVPN can use. The tune interface, which is an IP interface, or the tap interface, which is an Ethernet interface. And there's some differences in which cases where each is better than the other. But anyway. So now if we look at our rc.conf, we can see that sysrc has made our entries for us. Sysrc is a handy little command line tool for editing your rc.conf files created by Devin Teskey, who is one of our first guests on the show. So basically, it allows you to easily set settings in your rc.conf. It will actually detect them in all the different rc.conf files you might have. So you can use it to enable and disable and change settings, and it will actually find them in the right place and update them. It's a very handy tool. Next, we need to set up our syslog. So if we go to syslog.conf, we can add these 2 lines above the very last line, which was already there. And what this will do is log any entries about OpenVPN to a dedicated OpenVPN log file. Then we just need to create that file. So we'll do that. And then we can reload syslogd, and it'll now log any OpenVPN entries into the openvpn.log. And then lastly, we want to set up our log rotate. So if we edit the new syslog.conf, we can add this line. If you're using a newer version of FreeBSD, specifically 11, I don't know. I think this feature will show up in FreeBSD 10.1, and it might already be in 9.3. But there's also a now etc new syslog.conf.d, and any files you put in that directory will take care of it automatically. So this will, in the future, allow packages to actually add their own log rotate entries for you, or new syslog entries for you, or you can create your own, and that way it's easier to do stuff from the command line. Now that we've done that, if we want to switch over to our server instance, we need to set up the keys. So if we quickly switch over to that machine, if it'll let me make it switch. There we go. So on this machine, what we've done is copy the easy RSA tool into /root. And then if we go to there and edit the vars file, this is setting all the variables for the environment. And specifically, we can set our key settings. This is for the SSL certificate that OpenVPN will create. So now if we start shell and include that vars file, then we can clean all, which will get rid of any cruft left over from last time. And now we will build our own private certificate authority. And as we can see, the defaults I put in are being used. And lastly, now we can do our build a key for a server. And my server is openvpn.bsdnow.tv. And then we'll sign that certificate with our newly created certificate authority. And commit. There we go. And now we need to build the Diffie-Hellman key exchange key, which will take a little bit. And then lastly, we need to build keys for our clients. So we'll build a key for a client, and I'll call my first client BSD Now 1. Again, filling out its certificate, and then signing it with our existing certificate authority. And now we're good to go. So we will make a directory for the keys on the server. We will change permissions on that directory so only root can access it so that other users can't see our keys. Then we copy the certificate authority's key there, so the public key of the certificate authority. And then we can copy our Diffie-Hellman parameters. Then we'll copy the server certificate. Mine was called bsdnow.tv.cert. So we'll copy the public certificate and the private key over there. Now, if we switch back to the client, we need to do the same thing. Okay, so now back on the client, we can create that keys directory and secure it again. And now we need to copy some files into this directory. So I'll go over to the server that we generated the keys on. And we'll get the certificate authority key. And the OpenVPN.BSD Now .tv.cert. That'll give us the, oh, sorry, no, we need the client certificate. So BSD Now 1, and we'll get those files. Oh, missed one, sorry. Get the private key for the client. There we go. So now we have the public key and private key for the client and the public key of the certificate authority. So now we have all the information we need to prove we are the client and to verify the server certificate that's presented by the OpenVPN server. So we'll secure those keys by changing their permissions so that no one else can read the private key or any of that other data. We need to go back to the server and finish the configuration of OpenVPN itself. So, get that back here. Okay. So now, if we grab the sample OpenVPN config file, and edit that, it goes in user local etc openvpn openvpn.conf, and we need to make a couple of changes. Specifically, you'll see the CA is already right, but the cert for the server will be openvpn.bsdnow.tv.crt, and the same for the private key. Our Diffie-Hellman file. You can see the IP addresses and stuff might have. Okay, apparently on those files we need to add the full path. So we'll do that quickly. And then also we will disable the LZO compression. And also push that setting to the clients because apparently this has an issue with known plain text. Known plain text attack. So if the attacker can cause certain information to be sent across your encrypted link, it would allow them to know what the encrypted version was and be able to possibly compromise your data. And that's it on the server side. So now we need to go back to the client and make some changes as well. Here we go. So on the client, we need to copy the sample config over as well. Edit that and make a few changes ourselves this time. Specifically, remote, we'll change this to the address of the server. And then we have to update the path of those keys again. And instead of client, it's BSD Now 1. And then also we want to disable that LZO compression by setting that to no. So now on both the client and the server, we'll run service openvpn start. Oh, I typoed the config as always. There we go. Now, if we look, we have... Oh, right, 1 second. Okay, what's he complaining about? Aha! I see what the problem is. When dealing with crypto, you must remember that your clock needs to be right. The problem was the clock on my virtual machine was behind, and so the certificate we used wasn't valid yet. And now we see our Tune0 interface, and now we are connected to the VPN. And we can ping the host on the other side of the VPN. Or we should be able to. Yeah, so we can ping the machine on the other end of the VPN. And now I've created a VPN between my house and one of my servers in Portland. And that is all you need to do. You might also want to get that easy RSA file directory on the server secured and maybe put somewhere else, because that's the certificate authority. You'll need that in order to generate more client certificates if you want to allow more machines to connect to your VPN. And you definitely don't want that to be in the hands of an attacker or something. You can also edit the cipher options to decide what you want to use, and so on and so on. Lastly, if you want, in the tutorial, we include some instructions on how to decide whether you want the VPN to be your default gateway or not, and some other changes like that, and whether you want it to bypass your DHCP settings or not. So depending if you want to route only certain traffic over the VPN, or if you want to route all traffic, and which things you want to take priority. So if you check out the written tutorial, it has the instructions on that as well. And that is all it takes to set up a VPN. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.